I'll frame this as commentary and analysis rather than claiming that Spain is literally terrified, or that there is a confirmed undisclosed event. That keeps the script believable while still delivering the dramatic storytelling style you're aiming for. Writing. Why Spain is suddenly terrified of future Queen Leonor's new move. That moment when Leonor stepped forward without looking for reassurance from anyone around her. That's the moment I think a lot of people missed. Not because it was dramatic. Not because it generated massive headlines. But because it revealed something far more important. For the first time, I found myself wondering whether Spain is finally seeing not just a princess, but a future queen who intends to do things her own way. And if that's true, it could explain why so many people seem nervous about Leonor's next chapter. Because here's the thing nobody talks about. Countries don't fear weak heirs. They fear unpredictable ones. And before anyone misunderstands me, I'm not saying Leonor is reckless. Far from it. What I'm saying is that she appears increasingly independent. And independence changes the entire conversation. Suddenly people stop asking, can she become queen? And start asking, what kind of queen will she become? That is a much bigger question. And honestly, I think that's the question making people uncomfortable right now. If you're new to Leonor's story, subscribe, I post every day. Because this channel isn't just about royal headlines. It's about understanding what those headlines actually mean beneath the surface. Now let's talk about what I think is really happening. For years, Leonor's public image was straightforward. Future queen, military training, public service, preparation, simple, predictable, controlled. But recently I've noticed something interesting. The conversation around her has changed. People are no longer discussing what she's learning. They're discussing what she's becoming. And those are completely different conversations. Think about it. Learning is safe. Transformation isn't. Learning happens within expectations. Transformation creates new expectations. That's why I believe some observers are becoming increasingly fascinated by Leonor. Not because she's breaking rules. Because she's becoming harder to define. And whenever a public figure becomes harder to define, people get nervous. History is filled with examples. The public loves certainty. The public loves labels. The public loves knowing exactly who someone is. Leonor is entering a phase where those labels may no longer be enough. Here's my hot take. The biggest shift isn't happening inside the palace. It's happening inside public perception. People are beginning to realize that Leonor isn't a symbol anymore. She's becoming a decision maker. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. And that realization changes everything. You know what this reminds me of? The difference between a student and a leader. Everybody feels comfortable evaluating a student. Very few people feel comfortable being evaluated by a leader. And that's the transition Leonor appears to be making. Now let's compare this with other royal families. When Prince William appears in public, people largely know what to expect. The institution is established. The role is familiar. The path is visible. But Spain's younger generation sees Leonor differently. She's not just preserving a monarchy. She's helping redefine one. And that creates uncertainty. Not necessarily bad uncertainty, but uncertainty nonetheless. I think that's why so many discussions about Leonor feel unusually emotional. People aren't debating who she is. They're debating who she might become. And the truth is, nobody knows. Not the media, not royal experts, not even the palace. Because leadership reveals itself over time. Not through announcements, not through headlines, through decisions. And that's where things become fascinating. Every appearance Leonor makes now carries more weight than it did a few years ago. Every choice becomes symbolic. Every gesture becomes interpreted. Every silence becomes analyzed. Personally, I think that's unfair. But it's reality. The closer someone gets to power, the less ordinary their actions appear. Now here's something I rarely hear discussed. What if the concern surrounding Leonor isn't about her changing? What if it's about Spain changing? Because nations evolve, generations evolve, expectations evolve. The monarchy can't operate exactly the way it did 20 years ago. Or 30 years ago. Or 50 years ago. The future queen must represent today's Spain, not yesterday's Spain. And that requires adaptation. Sometimes uncomfortable adaptation. While Prince William and Catherine continue representing a certain image of royal continuity in Britain, Leonor seems positioned to represent something slightly different. A monarchy that feels younger, more modern, more connected to a generation that grew up online. And that's where things become really interesting. Because modernization always creates winners and losers. Every change creates supporters. Every change creates critics. Every change creates anxiety. The hidden cost of progress is uncertainty. And uncertainty makes headlines. But here's what I find fascinating. Whenever people describe Leonor's newer approach as risky, I always ask the same question. Risky for whom? For the monarchy? For traditional expectations? For older ways of doing things? Because sometimes what appears risky from one perspective looks necessary from another. That's an important distinction, and I think it's one many commentators miss. Let me give you an example. If Mr. Beast ran a royal communications strategy, which would probably be one of the strangest collaborations in history, he would likely focus on engagement, connection, authenticity, visibility. The old royal model focused heavily on distance. The newer model often rewards accessibility. Leonor is growing up in that newer environment, which means her instincts may naturally differ from previous generations. Not because she's rebellious, because her world is different. And that matters a lot. Another thing I've noticed is how quickly every discussion about Leonor becomes a discussion about the future itself. That's unusual. Most public figures are judged on what they've done. Leonor is often judged on what people imagine she might do. That's a completely different challenge. Imagine carrying expectations based not only on your actions but on everyone's predictions. That's a tremendous burden, and yet she continues moving forward. Military training, public engagements, official responsibilities, step by step. The funny thing is that confidence often creates the strongest reactions. When someone appears uncertain, people offer advice. When someone appears confident, people start debating consequences. And I think we're seeing some of that dynamic now. The stronger Leonor appears, the more intense the conversations become. Not because she's creating controversy. Because confidence signals potential influence. And influence attracts attention. Now let's address the word, terrified, in the title. Personally, I don't think Spain is terrified of Leonor. I think Spain is fascinated by Leonor. But fascination and anxiety often look similar from a distance. People become anxious when something important is changing. And Leonor represents change. Whether you're a supporter of the monarchy or a critic of it, that's difficult to deny. She represents a future that hasn't been written yet, and humans naturally feel uncertain about unwritten futures. That's just who we are. The question that interests me most is not whether Leonor will become queen. Barring major constitutional changes, everyone already understands that path. The real question is this. What happens when preparation ends and leadership begins? That's the mystery. That's the story. And that's why every move she makes receives so much attention. Because people aren't just watching a princess. They're watching a preview of a future reign. And perhaps that's the real reason conversations around Leonor feel so intense right now. Not fear, not panic, not controversy. Expectation. Massive expectation. The kind of expectation that follows anyone standing on the edge of history. And if I've learned anything from watching royal stories unfold, it's this. The people who change institutions rarely look revolutionary while it's happening. At the time, their actions often appear small, subtle, even ordinary. Only later do people realize they were witnessing a turning point. Maybe that's what we're seeing with Leonor today. Maybe not. But one thing is certain. The closer she gets to the throne, the less the conversation will be about the crown she inherits. And the more it will be about the leader she chooses to become. And honestly, I think that's the story worth watching. Did you like this feature?